You are welcome to today's lesson. Today we are continuing our discussion on rigid motion, and our subtopic for discussion is reflection on the line y equals negative x. Now, what are the types of reflection? Already in our previous lessons, we looked at reflection in the x-axis. We also looked at reflection in the y-axis, reflection in the line y equals x, and today we are looking at reflection in the line y equals negative x. Now, how do we demonstrate reflection in the line y equals negative x? How do I plot the mirror line? So that is what we want to demonstrate. And so as usual, I have the x and the y-axis. I have the positive and the negative side of the y-axis. I also have the positive and the negative side of the x-axis. And remember, we are performing the reflection in the line y equals negative x. Now, this implies that every value I pick for y is the same as negative x value. And so, for instance, if I pick the y value to be 0, automatically to get the x value, I just have to negate the y value. So under normal circumstance, I'm supposed to get x equals negative 0. But 0 is a neutral number, so that is why we still have 0. We don't have negative 0. And so if I'm to plot this as a point, it becomes 0, 0, which is 0 on the x-axis and 0 on the y-axis. If I pick the y value to be positive 5, what will be the corresponding x value? So I just have to negate the y value, and that will give me the x value. So that becomes x equals negative 5. And so this becomes a point, and that point is negative 5 on the x-axis, then positive 5 on the y-axis. So when I'm to plot this on the graph, the first point was 0, 0, which will appear at the origin. Then the next point was negative 5 on the x-axis, then positive 5 on the y-axis. Now, what if I pick the y value to be negative 5? What do you think will be the corresponding x value? Remember, the x value, we just have to negate the y value and we get the x. So when we are to negate the y value, it produces x equals negative multiplying the negative 5. Already the y value was a negative value, and we are going to multiply it by another negative value, which will produce a positive value. X equals positive 5. And that produces the point 5 on the x-axis, then negative 5 on the y-axis. So when we plot this on the graph, this is what we have. So we can join all these points together using a line, and that line is what we are calling the mirror line. And so anytime we have reflection in the line y equals negative x, this is how it looks like. Now let's solve some examples under reflection in the line y equals negative x. And so if the mirror line is known already, how do you perform the reflection? And so let's reflect the point 3, negative 2, which is the first point. Then the second point is negative 2, positive 4. So when we are reflecting, remember we are reflecting in the line y equals negative x. And so we pick the first point, which is 3 on the x-axis, then negative 2 on the y-axis. So we move this point towards the mirror line. So let's count 1, 2. So I counted 2 steps to get to the mirror line. In the same way, I'm going to count 2 steps down the mirror line, because remember, this is a slanted mirror line. So we move down 1, 2. So the last point forms the new point, which is 2, negative 3. Then we pick the second point, which is negative 2, then positive 4, and we move towards the mirror line. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I move 4 steps to the mirror line. In the same way, I'm going to move 4 steps down the mirror line. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So the last point produces a new point, which is negative 4, positive 2. And so you observe that the first point I picked, which is 3, -2, after reflecting in the line y equals -x, gave us 2, -3. And also the second point, which was -2, 4, after reflecting, also gave us -4, +2. And so you observe that the first point, the first object point, its x coordinate was a positive value, and after reflecting, it became a negative value and a y coordinate. And also the y coordinate of the object point was a negative value, and after reflecting, it became the x coordinate of the image, but this time around a positive value. Now in the second object point, its x coordinate was a negative value, and after reflecting, it became a positive y coordinate in the image. And also the y coordinate of the object was a positive value, and after reflecting, it became the x coordinate of the image, but this time around it was negative. So what does this imply? Let's take note that anytime I have a point A, which is xy, and I'm reflecting in the line y equals -x, this implies that the point given in the question, which is point A, xy, first I have to reverse it, so it becomes yx. Then afterwards I negate both sides. So after negating both sides, I'm going to get -y, -x. Let's pick another example. This time around, the object point is A, which is -x, +y, and we are reflecting the line y equals -x. So first, what do? I reverse the point, so it becomes y -x. Then negate both sides. If I negate both sides, remember the y is positive, so this time around it becomes negative. And already the x was negative, so negating it again will become positive. Now the next point is point A, which is -1, -2. And so this case, what do? We reverse the point, and that becomes -2, -1. Then we negate both sides, and remember they were already negative, and so when we negate them again, they become positive values. Now if you know what you are doing, which is if you are familiar with performing reflection in the line y equals -x, you don't have to go through all the 3 stages. You can just pick the object point this time around. So I have the object point P to be 3, -5. And we know when we are reflecting the line y equals -x, first I have to reverse the 2 values. Then I'll negate both sides. So that will produce the image point P1, which is 5, -3. Now let's solve some example. In this example, we are to draw the triangle ABC with vertices A, which is 2, 4, B, 3, 5, and C, 4, 4. And we are also to draw the image triangle A1, B1, C1 of triangle ABC under a reflection in the line y equals -x. And the last thing we are to do is to indicate the coordinates of the triangle A1, B1, C1. And so definitely we'll need a graph sheet as usual. So I'll plot the x and the y axis. I have the positive and the negative side of the y axis, the positive and the negative side of the x axis. And we're given certain points to plot. The first point was A, 2, 4, B, 3, 5, and point C, which is 4, 4. So quickly I'll pick the first point, A, which is 2, 4. I believe by now we are familiar with the plotting. Then the next point is B, which is 3, 5. Then the last point C, which is 4, 4. Then I will join the points together. So I'll join A to B, B to C, and the last point is A to C. And that forms the triangle ABC. And remember, we are to reflect this triangle ABC on the line y equals -x. And so if I pick the first point, which is A, 2, 4, and we are reflecting the line y equals negative x, what do you remember? We said first, we reverse the 2 points and negate them. So when I reverse them, I'll be having the image point as A1, which is negative 4, negative 2. The second point was B, which is 3, 5. So if I'm reflecting in the line y equals negative x, first I reverse the point and negate them. So when I reverse and negate them, I'll be getting B1, which is negative 5, negative 3. Then the last point, which is point C, 4, 4, since they are the same number, when I reverse them, it is still the same thing. Then I negate. And that will give me negative 4, negative 4, which is the last image point, C1. So with this, we can just go ahead and plot them. So I'll pick the first point, which is A1, negative 4, negative 2. The next point, B1, which is negative 5, negative 3. And the last point, C1, which is 4, that is negative 4, negative 4. And so I'll just join them together. So I'll join A1 to B1 and B1 to C1, and the last point, A1 to C1. And that forms the image triangle A1, B1, C1. You can also decide to use the mirror line to demonstrate the reflection in the line y equals negative x. Now what do you observe? So as usual, the first point given to us was A, 2, 4, and after reflecting, it became negative 4, negative 2. The second point was B, which is 3, 5, and after reflecting, became negative 5, negative 3. And the last point, C, was 4, 4. After reflecting, became negative 4, negative 4. And so you observe that the x-coordinate of the first point became a y-coordinate to the image point. By this time around, it became negative. And the y-coordinate of the object point also became the x-coordinate of the image point. By this time around, it also became negative. So the second object point, the x-coordinate was a positive value, and after reflecting, it became a y-coordinate for the image. By this time around, a negative value. And the y-coordinate of the object point was a positive value, and after reflecting, it became a negative value, which is also the x-coordinate in the image. Then the last point, C, its object point, the first point, which is the x-coordinate, was a positive value, and after reflecting, it became the y-coordinate. By this time around, a negative value. And also the y-coordinate of the object point was positive, and after reflecting, it became a negative value. Now your assignment. You are to draw the triangle PQR with vertices P, which is 2, 5, Q, which is 5, 7, and R, 8, 3. You are also to draw the image triangle P1, Q1, R1 of triangle PQR under a reflection in the line y equals negative x. Then lastly, you are to indicate the coordinate of the triangle P1, Q1, R1. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next lesson.